Hello everyone, welcome to a new Process Mining Café. Today we are going to talk about business cases. Now business cases, that's a very interesting topic, a little bit complicated sometimes. We had an article last week on the blog that talks about how to make a business case for process mining. So today's café, if you will, is a little bit of a companion for this article too. And we invited a guest for today's Process Mining Café. And our guest, I'm here with Rudy, and our guest today is Miguel Gómez from PROA or Chopo Laboratories. Hi, Miguel. And hi, Rudy.
Hi.
Now, before we get into the cafe, though, we wanted to remind everyone that the Process Mining Camp is happening this year again. It's happening, taking place over 2 days on 13th and 14th June. So, yeah, it's really a bigger cafe this year than ever. And so there's actually until Friday this week, you can still get reduced tickets. So if you already know that you want to come, you should get your ticket now before midnight on Friday, before prices go up. Yes, and also we, this week we described some more, we published some more information about the boot camp that we are going to have at this year's camp. So Rudy, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about for who the boot camp is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so typically at camp, people are coming together, process miners, which already have some experience or at least have knowledge about process mining itself and how it works. But sometimes also new people want to join. And this year we have a boot camp. And the boot camp contains of 2 sessions. So one online session where you meet a group of new members that are joining the process mining camp. And together you will kind of build a baseline experience in process mining. And so we will cover different type of topics. So in the first 2 hours in the online session, we will give an introduction and see how you can deal with these very complex process maps. Then we provide a homework exercise where you can play around and see and bring it into practice. And then on the first day at camp, before the actual camp starts, we will meet up with that group to have a second session to really dive a little bit deeper into different type of concepts, including the analysis, but also the data preparation. So then when you are joining camp, you already come prepared, right? So you can dive a little bit deeper. You can engage and discuss more deeper topics at camp itself.
Exactly, yes. And so especially at this year's camp, because this year's camp is more tailored towards experts. So if you're completely new, we do recommend, it's not strictly needed because you always learn a lot from, if you observe what people are doing, but we do recommend the bootcamp because you will be able to better place the things that you hear in your head and to relate them to your own process mining use cases. So that's for that. So now let's get started with the Process Mining Café. So as always, you can participate while we are live on the air. You can join us. You can join the chat on the website right where you're watching this right now. Just below, you can type your name. You don't need a password or an account. Just type your name and you're in the chat. And we will keep an eye on what you're saying. And we'll bring that into the discussion. Okay, so Miguel, maybe it would be good to start if you can explain us a little bit or tell us a little bit about what PROA or Chopo Laboratories, what you're doing, and also what your role is in the company.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Miguel Gómez. I'm a quality manager working for the operational expert excellence department, and our company is a group of companies dedicated to the shell care. We collect samples and take images from radiology equipment, and those images go through a process of interpretation from a medical view in order to have enough information for patients to have a correct treatment or a diagnosis on their treatments. We have more than 500 different sites all over our country, and we have 20 different laboratories collecting samples every day.
And in your own team, so you mentioned you're a quality manager, so how big is your team and what is your background? How do you work? Do you use process improvement technologies like Lean Six Sigma, for example? Or
Yeah, our group is more than 30 people on the operational excellence department. In my team, we're 4 dedicated to in processes. Those processes are at this moment working on the medical side in terms of delivery of the results. Some other teams are dedicated to the operations. Inside, some other teams are dedicated to quality of the customer attention, and we are all connected to serve people.
yes.
And yeah, some of the quality managers that we have are black belt in Six Sigma, and some of them have been working on auditing, and they are certified auditors. So yeah, we have I think a really great team.
Great. So it's a mix of roles and expertise in the team. And I understand, so you work with different groups in the organization. So the question needs to come from the business side, right? So I understood that the process mining project that you want to tell us more about here today was started by the corporate medical director. Do I remember this correctly?
Yes, it is. While we were analyzing some data from different sides of the company, we had to meet people at every single department. Some of them are working directly with the physicians on the medical side, and the director, she came to us and said, "Hey, I would like to see how to fix these problems in terms of delivery time. It's a promised time that we want to reduce, so we can have an advantage, a competitive advantage over." And started analyzing data according to what the customers said about the performance of our delivery time. And she was very interested in this project. So we started working with a group of medical department.
Yeah, that's a really good starting point, right? Really, we see that a lot, like for these kind of central improvement teams, they really need, the question needs to come from the business unit, so that the interest is there to do something with the results, but also because they need their participation to actually do something with the results, right? So it sounds like Miguel had a great starting point.
Yeah. So my question would be, so where did you start, right? So did you start with one site, or how was it decided where and which part of the process you were looking at?
Well, since we have many different sites, we started with the big analyzing the average delivery time for all of the specialties that we have. But then we needed to focus on some of the particular processes, like the imaging processes, especially on radiology. So we decided to start with those processes, since we have already people coming to us and talking about those processes. And they were very interested on that particular topic because some years ago they had some troubles on delivering results.
Mm-hmm. And where did you get the data from? That's, of course, then the first point. If you want to apply process mining to do this type of analysis, you need to have data. Do you have your own custom systems in the company, or do you use standard systems? Where did you get it?
Yeah, it was very interesting because we started asking data from the IT department, and every single day we were asking for some reports and more information about the site, times, about the regions and different specialties. So I think we got into a point that we were asking a lot of information from them. So they really opened the database. They created a Google website where we can go and collect information from ourselves. I think it's very important for projects to have information available, not just asking and wait to see when it's coming. So the IT department did a great job. They created a website replicating a lot of information that we needed in operations. Of course, that website it's separated from the operation, so we don't have any trouble on accessing and making that analysis while they were working. So it's a copy of the information that we have on Google.
Yeah.
And once we had that access, we started collecting information on the different status of the operations right from the beginning, where the customers come to our places, and following the operations one by one, taking images, delivering images for interpretation, getting the information, and then delivery of the results. So they already had that information on the systems. It was not available at that time for any people. So it was a good team with the IT department to start getting that information.
Yeah. And did they collect the data centrally? So for every site in one system, or did you need to collect it from every site or group of sites individually?
They have cloud computing, so everything that is coming from all of the different sites, it's collected on clouds.
On cloud.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they created a Google Cloud platform to put a copy of that information. Of course, not all of the information of the company that they wanted, but at least the information from the operations that we needed.
Yeah. So then you had your data that you need for process mining, and then how quickly could you create some first models to look at the process?
Well, it was a really surprise. For me, it was really, really fast. We don't need too much information about the processes. I mean, if you have the data with the status of the operations, if you have the time, if you have the description of the data, that's enough. Just 3 columns of data where you can start with.
Right, and then you started looking at the processes, right? And in fact, I think we have a process here. So would it be a good moment to show the process flow that you discovered? So we can.
Yes, we have a lot of maps coming from the different sites, and the one that you're looking at is a operation coming from different sites where they send information to one particular site.
So is every little box, every activity is one site communicating with another site? Is this how we can read this?
Every single top to the bottom is a process from one site. Mm-hmm. And then it goes to one particular site where we have a group of people redirecting some of the flow. But as you can see, much of the information that was coming every single day, at the end of the day, was kind of stuck right there. It created a big problem with the delivering. Yeah, because the schedules where we collect the data are not always the same schedule that, for example, physicians have. And they had to wait also for information. Patients normally have a lot of information that is needed to make the correct interpretation. So it's not just taking the image, it's also getting all the information and put that information available for the physicians to do the process of interpretation.
Yeah.
So
that was,
it takes time.
Yeah, that was one of the things that you noticed, right? So we had a lot of different models that we looked at when we picked this one here for showing in the cafe. I'm not sure if we're really seeing it like that, but what you observed in your analysis is you saw a lot of kind of yellow dots which were very big, right? Which indicates this kind of batch processing. So you have a lot of cases on top of each other, so the bubbles become bigger. So, and this is what you observed, right? Where people were collecting images, for example, and then sending them on to the next place later. So,
we had different processes in the middle. Some of those processes, additional to collecting information, they had to put that information available for the physicians. We are in the process of changing some of our systems to get everything online. The way we were working is we have a lot of paperwork. We have some deliveries, electronic deliveries, but most of the images go to a web cloud, and physicians don't have all of the information at the same time, and they can have information coming from different sites. We don't have one physician for each site. We have a group of physicians for a group of sites. So when you have people sending information from different sites, they can receive that information, but they don't know how much they can have at the same time. And we discovered that because of the information process that they require, they were doing something like the little batches of information, waiting for the next process to be. In the case of the physicians, the next process would be the interpretation, but they wanted to collect more and more data from more and more patients before sending those data to the physicians. So they were creating batches instead of a continuous flow. So we discovered that while they were creating this in terms of gathering information for not sending everything every minute, at the same time they were creating lots, and those lots were delivered at certain time where not everyone was available. So it created the next day delivery in many cases.
Yeah. And they were probably not aware, right, what happened upstream and downstream.
The problem is that at that time we didn't have any system telling them that we already have a lot of requests from different sites. So you, for example, as a physician, you come to your office and you have a bunch of requests and you start working, and next day is the same, but you don't really have the knowledge of when when they started the process. You just receive the images and just start working on them in order to send the results. So what we discover by using process mapping is that all of those requests were coming from different sites at the same time and with a lot of variability. And the process that we were using for redistributing that information to our physicians was not measured. We started measuring how much of that load in terms of request we have, how much of the information we have to send to the one day in order for them to complete the work. And in some cases, we discovered that because of the specialties that they have, you had to send particular information to a particular physician. So if you don't have the information and all of the variability that you can have in the process, it's kind of difficult to redirect that information. It happens, for example, with one of the studies where we have 5 physicians attending most of the requests, but we discovered that we have more than 18 people around our country that can do almost the same job. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting because by mapping all of those real processes, how we discover the real operation, and that helped a lot to show the physicians what was happening, how the requests were coming every day, where we needed some help, where they started and how they got stuck at certain point because of the rate of those requests.
Yeah. So with the with your cross-mining analysis, you could discover these kind of behavioral patterns, right? But you could also measure the actual time. So the project started with the request from the medical director because there was a perception of a problem, right? So how long did you then find that didn't take until the customers received their result? Was it too long or maybe not at all?
We have a promise some delivery time for, it's different for different specialties. Yeah. And for example, we discovered that the interpretation process was taking more than 80% of the delivery time in terms of what the customer see. Internally, physicians didn't take that long. They could deliver one job every single hour, but in the system you see as a 24 hours delivery because not because they were slow in the interpretation process, it was because they were really stuck out there, not moving at the right time. So that's one of the things that we discover in process mapping. And of course, resources are limited. We are growing every single year. We are creating more sites, and we have a lot of demand. Fortunately, we are increasing our sales and our points of sales, and we have more and more requests from. So we had to analyze that data, and one of the things that we discovered also it was that the process of getting that information, of course, it was a little bit complicated. So collecting information from customers, every single patient, for every single specialty, it's difficult because you have to ask a lot of questions to the patients. In some cases, it could be more than 100 questions, depending on the response that the customer has. And collecting that information, it's also difficult in some cases. So we discover, of course, the main problem in terms of the interpretation time, but also discover some other problems with how we collected information and how they were working on batches instead of continuous flow because of that. And in the process, with the specific times, we can calculate the averages, we can show the total time to them. And they, at the very beginning, they didn't believe what we were showing because they didn't have that information together.
Yes. So you also measured, right? You looked at the process maps, you looked at the process maps with them together, but also, we put here the performance filter. So for the case duration, how did you use that one? Let me go to the slide. Yes. So now I think you can see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is interesting because one of the things that process mining software does is it shows you how long does it take for each case. And of course, we have certain parameters that we can compare to. And this 80%, close to 82% we have is the percent of deliveries on time compared to the promised time. It's an average. Of course, it's seconds or holidays or something, but it happens to be lower than they expected. So that was one of the things that I think process mining helped us to show them.
Is there a particular promise? So if you look at it from a customer perspective?
We had different times depending on the different studies. It goes from 1 hour to 4 days, depending on the type of the study. And some of the requests even take 2 weeks because they had to process some samples, wait for growing some bacteria or laboratory experiments.
Okay, so I understand. Of course, also by analyzing the process, you mentioned different aspects. There's, that's one of the things, right? Process mining generates a lot of ideas about what you could do differently about the process, or things you discover that you maybe didn't think about before. And for you, there were also many different things. But one of the things that's also very clear from what you have described is that you saw that this kind of lot-based management, collecting a lot of cases until you send them later, is not the best way to do it, and that a continuous flow, sending immediately each and every single picture, would improve the process. And I think that's one of the nice things about this particular project, right? That you had quite a remarkable impact doing this. So so should we maybe show that, and then also talk a little bit more about how you actually did the project, and in the kind of the second half when we talk about the kind of the business case dimension of it. But should we look at the results a little bit that you achieved?
Yes, please.
So
Thank you.
We have two pictures here, right? One, this is the average, and the mean, of course, is more influenced by outliers. But so what are we seeing? And we can show the median also. So.
What we are looking at this in this chart is we had different weeks from 36 to 44. Each week we collected samples of what was happening with the processes, especially delivery times. And of course, for this particular specialty, we were very interested in the number of services that we have. We have a seasonality that goes on the months of October and November. And every single year, we have an increase on the demand. As you can see, the number of services could go up to triple of the regular demand. And we started the project before that season to make some changes on the distribution of the services and the flow that we were noticing in terms of batch. We wanted to make a continuous flow.
Yeah.
So the first 3 weeks we worked on training, and we could reduce the delivery time, but we still have the regular load. So the real challenge was when we had an increase in the demand of the number of services that you see in the last bars. Mm-hmm. So even though that we have that increase in the number of services requests, we could manage to have the same delivery time. So we reduce delivery time by 50% at least. But we also have an increase in the number of services, almost double and triple in some weeks.
Yeah.
So it was nice to have those numbers, because we wanted to show that it was going to work. We started with a single. I think we did 3 physicians pilot before that, so we can show them that this was going to work. And the issue you were presenting, it corresponded to almost 8 different sites. Results were impressive. They changed a lot the way they were working by implementing some of the continuous flow and distribution of the services. At that time, we only have 5 people attending most of the services because we have a concentrated site. But we discovered that we have a lot of people working outside that site, working on different specialties that could help with the increase in the demand. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we discovered by using the map, it was that they were dedicating a lot of time to some other specialties when we needed, especially at that location, at those weeks, more help with one of the specialties. So we redirect the information and the requests to that particular specialty in that time. And it helps a lot, because instead of having 5 people attending requests, we went from 5 to 18 people attending requests all over the country, and we could reduce the time. And at the same time, the other jobs that physicians were attending were redirected to different people. So we didn't notice until we have the map with all of the specialties inside. We discovered that they were not working in only one specialty, the one that we were requiring, but in many at the same time. So that was one of the things that helped a lot. And when we showed them the maps, physicians got a good idea of what was happening, and they helped a lot. We have some directors in terms of regional directors that are helping us to present people with this information and send or redirect information to physicians all over the country.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great, and I think the result is really impressive, right? So if we go back to the slide, then we just saw the average, but also you also shared the version with the median, which is really even more clear, and you can clearly see kind of the reduction, which is also, like you're describing, sustainable. So even though the blue bars grow a lot, so this is the volume of requests that's coming in, the yellow or orange line is the time it takes is sustainably dropped. And I think the last picture here that you shared to illustrate this is also, you showed these kind of late delivery, so the impact on late deliveries, right? So this is a picture here where you see the shape of the year. So where you see this kind of big peak, right? You have a promotion, 2 months a year or something. Is it that?
Yes, we have a national promotion of that particular studies. Mm-hmm. and that's why we got a lot of requests. But compared to 2022, we have a lot of requests, but we didn't increase the delivery time. So the number of late deliveries is what you are looking at on the oranges. Mm-hmm. And on 2023, when we applied these techniques, we reduced a lot the number of late deliveries because of the seasonality of that particular study.
Yeah, but although the demand was the same, right? So you still had the seasonal pattern. There was this increase in numbers, but not in delayed deliveries. But even this increased volume could be handled by the people. And I think that's a nice closing the loop to the beginning of the project, where it started with the medical director being concerned about the complaints, right? So the complaints from the customers came as a cause of these late deliveries. So that's basically how you address that problem.
Since we are working with different specialties and we started with this particular problem, we want to replicate this to some other specialties. Actually, we started this year working with all of the sites. We started a training process on continuous flow for all of the sites and for all of the specialties on the radiology department. So we show them every single week or every 2 weeks, we have a short presentation with managers and director, and they wanted to see our results. We have a department that is following all of the projects all over the company, and they wanted us to show every 2 weeks what was happening. So we created the before and after charts to show them what was happening. And I can tell you in some of the weeks, we reach more than 99% of deliveries on time.
Wow.
From that perspective, since we have the previous year, in some cases with a high demand, it was a great job what they did.
That's really great. Maybe before we go to the second half, let me just see it. Really, did you wanted to ask something else before the project, before we go to the business case?
No, I think it's a clear story. So I'm always wondering, right? So if you apply this process mining technique in a more medical type of setup with specialists and MDs, so how do they respond to the process mining exercise, right? So you are doing an analysis, and of course they need to be part of it because the process needs to be changed, so their behaviors need to be changed as well. But they are really expert, right? So you cannot tell them how they should do their job.
Do they see the process maps? For example, here we see the before and after process maps. Do they understand what you if you show them this?
It's difficult when you try to change what they are doing for many years. It was designed that way. They didn't have too many requests, so they had no problem with delivery times. The problem started when we start growing, and we grow and grow and grow. So the number of requests, of course, was too much to attend in the same way they were designed at the very beginning. We don't tell them how to do their job. We just changed the way they were moving the jobs.
Okay.
So they still have their particular insight and reports and everything that they do regularly. We just changed the way we information. And that was a big change.
Yeah, and had the corporate director a role there as well? Because you have all these locations, right? So the change was happening in that one location, so the work was being divided, but people were being trained, right, in other locations. So how was that kind of organized in a way? Were you able to kind of organize that by yourself, or was there something needed, a structure that created
maybe
you need a lot of that.
Yes, or maybe, but before I think how we organize the change, maybe we can discuss this when we talk about the costs for the business case, because that's directly related to what you're doing.
Yeah. It is related.
Let's come back to that, because it's a really impressive project, and we could just talk about the project would be fine, right? But what I also really liked when you told us about this is that you mentioned at some point in time that after, even though business case for process mining, which is more focused on how do you actually do a business case for process mining versus not doing process mining, right? So it's very much coming from this perspective. Like, if you do things manually, you have to talk to a lot of people, you have to manually draw things. And I can maybe just briefly show the template that we published along with the article. So you find it on the blog. We will also link it with the show notes of this Café. Not sure, I think you can't see it yet, maybe now. Yes, so this is the template, but just to show you how it's organized, right? You can download the PDF version in the article directly. The first page, you don't need to fill in anything, but basically every business case, you always have these two sides. You have the costs and you have the benefits side, right? So the second sheet is where you start filling in some things. So from a process mining project perspective, you can fill in things like, well, maybe the software license, but also training. You have to think about, people need to learn how to do process mining, but some data extraction, sometimes you need to pay to get your own data, or you have to allocate some funds to make the data available, right? So this is the cost side, which can be filled in. But then you have the benefit side, and there's also, it's interesting that you can have different dimensions of benefits. You can have decreased costs, and here we have a lot of examples, and basically in this template you can go through and fill in what applies to you, or what you think will be applied to your project. And you have also, in addition to decreased cost, increased revenue, so where you can earn more money by the change or the improvement. And then there's a lot of kind of soft benefits, which are even harder to qualify, but still important to incorporate in your business case. So that's something we recommend to you, that you can use as a resource, and please let us know how it helps you, what feedback you have for it. But coming back to our discussion here, we can apply the same principle to quantify the benefit or make the business case for a project, right? So, and we also have these two sides, costs and benefits. So that's what we also wanted to talk with you about. And the costs are, of course, what you did to make this change. So please tell us how you made this change in the organization.
Sure. Yes, you need a big team to work with all of the sites. Actually, we have a value management office and a change management office. They work together with all of the leaders of the projects in order to get the proper training if you want to change some processes, like it was our case. Some of them help a lot with the preparation of the material. We have a training for 82 sites for that particular project. And even though that it didn't take long to train the people, we had to follow very close each one of the results. So that's why we created those charts. We were collecting information from the Google Cloud, but also we have direct interviews with people. And when you mentioned that process mining is helping you a lot to understand projects, we couldn't imagine how many hours we could take to visit each one of those sites to collect that information directly from people. Of course, we had the advantage of having those records on system, but you also need to go and verify with them what was really happening. And instead of visiting all of the sites, we collect information from all of them. And then we went to some of those sites to verify the data. So it helps a lot in the number of hours was reduced, of course, by many hours. I don't even think how many hours would take to have that information from one day, because we have millions of services per year.
Yeah.
So
it wouldn't be possible, essentially, right?
One of the things that we also discovered with process mapping is that it's a lot of variation. Many different ways to see the same process, because we have different people, because different sites, because of different ages. It changes a lot. But once you have that data concentrated, you can train them and say, well, we have these particular problems. We had this particular variability with particular time at these specialties, and everything was together to put together in order to do the proper training. And yes, it took almost 2 weeks to get some the first results, but it has to continue. We have followed that process from last year all the way these weeks this year. And of course, you always notice a little bit of change. Once they had the normal load, they start relaxing. And since we have the data and we continue with the data and creating the maps, we discovered, for example, that by the end of the year, they were increasing again the number of delayed deliveries. So we made the adjustments really fast, because we already had the maps, we already had the knowledge, we already had the training. So we just needed to go and refresh some information and change the way they were working.
That's such
an
important point, just to emphasize what you just said, that you have to repeat this, right? Really, we just talked about this today, that it's really important that you keep following up, because people can easily fall back into their old patterns if you don't keep your eye on.
That's also a cost that you don't normally see, because you had to start with the project, but you had to follow up on every single aspect once you trained and once you are working with a new way of doing things. And we also have in our team people dedicated to process documentation. So we are in that process of getting everything on documents as the way that we do things now. And it also requires time, it also requires resources, but it helps a lot to have that information on standards.
Yeah.
So we got a question from the audience. So Eve is asking. Eve is working in manufacturing, and they have systems to manage customer orders, and then they focus on the delivery. And he is kind of asking how process mining can help to understand and discover more efficient processes, and if it's possible to connect with multiple systems at once.
Yes, one of the things that help us a lot is that depending on the information, you can put everything in one single map. I mean, everything means we have different sites, we have different specialties, we have different people, and all of them can be combined in one single map. So at the end, you can select if you want to see the physicians' time, or if you want to see the sites' times, or if you want to see the specialties. Everything you can configure the process mapping to have that information, and you can analyze each part. No matter if you have different specialties or different sites or different products, it helps a lot.
Yeah. So in Eve's particular case, they're looking at orders, but if you look at the production part of it, if you look at the one-piece flow, it could be something else, right? So it could be individual products that are kind of grouped together and produced individually as parts. and then depending which view to take to see the production process, and then that's different from the ordering process, for example.
Yeah, and it also helps to discover bottlenecks. That's why we were showing before that.
Yeah. So that was the second part of that question, right? So if we talk about discovery, we look at the current process, right? But that doesn't say anything about the improved process or the better process, right? So if Eve refers to a more efficient process, so how is that defined, right? So if you look at these process maps, these discovered maps, how do you define an improved process?
Once you have the information, one of the things that we had to analyze that information in terms of statistics, using distributions, using we did some tests before sending that information about how much could we cut in terms of time. How much can we reduce the time by analyzing the data from the statistical part? We discover, for example, that we have an exponential distribution. So the mean of that particular data, we had to change that to reduce almost by 50% the mean, so we can deliver everything that we have on time. So you see the processes, and process mining has a nice feature of the Pareto charts, where it shows you how much one process is taking, how much in terms of time. So we took that information and discover where was the most important to reduce in terms of time, or where you can put some more resources to increase the number of services. It has a lot of information. It has statistics, it has times, it has bottlenecks, everything that you need to discover what you need to do.
And that's, of course, often a little bit a challenge, right? If you want to do this assessment before your actual process mining project, you don't really know yet, right? You have to look at the data to see what the opportunities are. But if you can get to the data, usually you can do some first quick scans easily to have some first impression, like what the potential improvement could be. And then,
So Marcus is saying you often start with a business case up front, right? So that's kind of where the question starts.
It's a chicken and egg a little bit,
or do you discover it along the way? Yeah? So there's also a particular way to look at these process maps to identify bottlenecks, right? So that's an obvious one, but rework, of course, is also an interesting one. Delays is an interesting one. And then Marcus mentioned, and that's, I think, what you almost touched upon a moment ago. So Marcus mentions he starts with a business case up front, and if he has that business case, he kind of develops the baseline, right? So the current measure of the process, and then tries to define the opportunity to improve, right? So from that or current baseline scenario, you want to go somewhere, and then there is a gap. And he mentions that he often uses particular confidence, but then is not realizing the 100% of that opportunity, but promises that half of that. So is that a practice that you take? How much of that opportunity you take kind of as a promise to be realized during the implementation? Because he mentioned, I'm scared to overpromise, right? So if I overpromise, then they consider it as a failure, right? So how much should we take? So what's your experience with this?
We had that at one particular presentation. The director came to us and said, "Hey, how much are you going to reduce the time?" At that time, they didn't know. But since I was doing a lot of statistical study, and because of some pilot programs that we implemented before. I said to the medical director, to cut 50% the time. And she said, "No way, we can't promise that." and I had the confidence in that because of the data that we analyzed first. So there is no way that you can promise anything if you don't have this previous analysis and previous pilot tests. I think you had to do that first in order to promise a certain delivery time. And it was a good promise. I think we got more than 50% of the time, and it worked very well. But it was because we already have some tests, pilot tests.
So I think also it's related to the complication factors of the implementation, right? So if the implementation is very challenging, it's a very good idea. But if it's very challenging, then of course, there is a particular risk taken. So the percentage is not something fixed that is always half, right? So
it's kind of hard.
You don't know upfront. But the pilot project is a really good suggestion. So if you can make some just really small pre-analysis, you have some numbers to go on to make some assessments. But even if you do the business case afterwards, right? So then now, like in your case, for example, we're in a different situation. We have realized the improvement. We know we can measure how much we improved, but still it's not that easy sometimes to quantify, right? So we still wanted to do it together. So for example, if we're looking at the cost side first, usually the cost side is easier, but if you're looking closely, it's not that easy either. So for example, you mentioned training, right? I wrote down a little bit some of the things you told me before, like what kind of trainings you did. So for example, you did a training with the site managers and regional managers to tell them, what needs to be changed and why, which was a 1-hour training. But then you also had a national training with all the 18 sites with the physicians, a 2-hour training. And there was, there's a supervisor on the physician's side who supported you with this. So you have to change the behavior of people. So they have to, for example, attend trainings. But how do you quantify this, right? Are you just counting kind of the time in terms of their salary? That seems kind of a lot. So in a way that would maybe become a lot of costs. So do you have any thoughts like how to incorporate kind of costs like training in a business case?
Well, of course we have the cost of gathering data and putting everything in one site so you can collect information in a faster way. But also the training, you had to dedicate hours from many people. If I tell you that we had 82 different sites, and just multiply those hours, 3 hours at least, for all of those, you may have a lot of time that apparently we're not producing any services, and that's also a cost. But we have a particular operation where most of the services are delivery during the morning, so you have also to find a good time to train people. Because of the technology that now we have everywhere, we can connect 80 sites. We also had a training 2 weeks ago where we have 160 different sites coming, and it was because the electronics that we have now, it's delivery. Of course, you had to take from many people, but it helps a lot, technology. In terms of the cost of changes, we also have an opportunity to discover by using the process mapping. We have a unbalanced load on people work. So we started a new project where we want to change that to balance the workload. So maybe you don't have the time at so many different sites, but in the other case, you had a lot of times that we are not using for the delivery of services. And we also discovered that with the maps, you have people working, I don't know, 50 services per day, and some other people working only 20, for example. Yeah. So you discover during the way. It's also a good thing to know.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's also, maybe it's a good point in time to mention another comment that we received already last week based on our article about the business cases. So Axel wrote some feedback with his experience about it. And one really important point that he made was that we should also not forget the time that it takes to really understand the process models, right? So that's essentially, it's not now the time that goes into the training, but it's the time that, that you as the analyst, needs to understand what you're looking at, but also to create the models on the right level of detail that it's useful, right? Really, that's one of the things that we will focus a lot on in the workshops, also at Process Mining Camp this year. And this is true. So if you talk about process mining and explain it in contrast to maybe the traditional way of working, we often describe it in a way like you have the data and then automatically you have the process map. I mean, sometimes that's true, but often it's actually quite some work to iteratively shape the data and get the model, on the right level.
Yeah, that's also what you see. So sometimes I see organizations that are kind of in the beginning of the process to understand how their processes work, right? And then they start using techniques like value stream mapping and mapping out their processes, and then use more simple or straightforward waste scan techniques in order to identify the waste, right?
Yeah.
And what you find is open doors. You find these open doors which often have an option to have a quick fix, right? So low-hanging fruits.
Yeah.
And then the argument is, do you want to spend all this time to pick the low-hanging fruits with a very more challenging approach, right? And I think that's also the purpose of this process mining exercise. It's very, very powerful to uncover all the details, right? So you can look at the top level, but go all the way down and look at these fine-grained nuances of these variations and differences. And that's just not possible with a different technique. And it maybe also answers partially a question of Jordi. Yeah? So Jordi is saying if we introduce standard business process improvement techniques and tools and methodology, so how does process mining kind of differentiate from the other techniques which we are using? And then he's kind of taking the angle of what's then the business case for process mining, probably compared to the other tools.
Yeah,
it's different than what we are here talking about, probably.
No, but I think it's a really good question. And I think what we say there usually is that process mining itself is agnostic with respect to which type of methodology you use around it. So doesn't matter if you're using Lean Six Sigma, DMake, or BPM, or some plan, do, check, act lifecycle for improvements, or for example, as an auditor, auditors have their traditional way of working. So there's a certain process that auditors follow when they do a project. Process mining does not replace any of that, but it's, if you use process mining in the context of such a methodology, it takes some time also to figure out how exactly process mining fits into this existing way of working. And that's something that people need time to find out, and where some of the, maybe we can link the article for the Lean Six Sigma series. But also I think, and I was thinking of that just before, I think the audit case study from Jasmin and Andreas is a really good one, because they really compare kind of how they do their audits normally without process mining. And then for each of the 10 or 12 phases that they had, they look at what does process mining change in this phase, and sometimes it is adding more time. Sometimes it's more effort. For example, if you just collect 10 samples or 30 samples of something, it's going to be less work, than preparing a data set and running ETL queries to get it in the right shape. So that's the thing. So it's not always just faster and magic, but there can be situations where you have to put much more work in than if you do something in the simple or manual way. So it's very good.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. I think you still need to see it kind of as one of the tools in the toolboxes, right?
Yeah.
So you need to pick the tool to apply it to the right problem, and that's, I think, you need to be the professional to be able to select the right tool. For some tools you need a statistical type of analysis. For other tools you need process mining. For some problems you need process mapping, for example. And picking the right tool for the purpose is one of the things. And then I think one of the advantages of process mining, if you look at it, is it gives you so much more detail, right? So if you really need to have this view on the flow, including all the complexity and variation, and if you need to do something with the variation and need to understand how it's kind of distributed, and if you also need to have that view on performance, then of course it takes twice as much as time in order to map it out, right? So understanding the full scope of mapping it out is complex, but then adding information to have this performance view also requires a lot of time, and so then it kind of starts to balance things out.
Yes,
I think we
no, please go ahead.
I think we have two sides. One is the technical side, where of course you know about statistical analysis, about some simulation tools, distribution, etc. But also we have the people side. For us, process mapping was a big difference when we were talking to physicians, for example, or technicians that were not related in any way to process improvement techniques. When we showed them what was really happening with the maps running over time and looking at those little dots, yellow dots, and creating those cumulative services overnight, they saw a different process of what they knew. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of help to show them how the process was working with a real example, with real times, with real people. Of course, they knew the numbers, they knew the sites, they knew the type of specialties that we were projecting. And that's where a big difference on how to convince people that we needed to change. So yes, that's a technical and a statistical part, but also the people working to discover what's really happening by looking at the maps. Yeah. So it was a lot of help.
That's such a good point, because, and it ties us back to we were talking about the training costs, right? You had to do all of these trainings, but if we're looking at it, it's an hour there or 2 hours there. That's the training to change a behavior. But to change a behavior, you have to get the people on your side. They need to understand why they should change, right? So that's, I think, what you're describing. You can actually get them on board with what needs to change and why it needs to change, to even have a chance to make this behavioral change with them through the training. Yeah, I think coming back to the business case, talking about the cost side, maybe one thing we can keep in mind is to try to be realistic, right? It also maybe depends on the business case. Is it more kind of a simple, high-level business case, or do you need to make it very detailed and try to think about all the dimensions and take it into account? And also with the data extraction, we always recommend to account a significant time in the data preparation, especially for the first project. That's maybe an upfront cost that might become lower if you do other types of projects later, or certainly if you do a repeat analysis for the same project, like Miguel has explained, that it's very easy for them to run the same analysis again now that all the data is there. But there is a certain cost at the beginning, so that needs to be part of the picture when you make a business case.
Yeah.
And then, let's also not forget to talk about the benefits, right? So, Miguel, if we're looking at the benefits for your project, so when you quantify that piece. So what would be the main thing that you would quantify for your business case?
The way the physicians were looking at the project at the very beginning, it was only on delivery time. They have a lot of records and indicators about what is happening on the operation, how many deliveries we have, how many were on time and late. That was the main concern at the very beginning. So that part was really easy because we changed the delivery time and we cut it by 50%. But when we were asked about what is the benefits in terms of money, how much are we getting out of this? I put a case where last year, for example, we had 5,000 customers with late deliveries. And we can calculate how much of those customers are coming back. And we have a percentage of returning customers, and we also can estimate how much of those customers are not coming back because a bad service, for example. We can estimate the benefits in terms of how many customers you're going to lose next year because you didn't deliver on time. And that's one way to estimate the benefits, and we did that. And another way was calculating the time that is required for some processes to get them done. Because when you work in lots, you actually are increasing the time that is waiting the next step for the process to continue. So if you estimate how many minutes per service you stop the process, you can also estimate how much of time you are wasting and not getting money out of that. So it's different from the financial state of results. They don't see it clearly because we don't sell them time. They want to see money, but I can tell them, if that time that you were waiting, you dedicate that time to sell, then you can get a lot of revenue out of that time. It's not because you reduce the time, it's because you had more time to do more deliveries. And that's another way to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really interesting way to look at it. So if you take the reduced late deliveries and you make assumptions, right? That's always with a business case, you have to make assumptions. So for example, if you say 5,000 complaints, next year we won't have these 5,000 complaints because 99% are delivered on time, so there's no reason to complain. And then so you know what the value of an order is on average for these types of service. I think I wrote it down, you mentioned like for 5,000 and additional orders that you expect for the next year, you could translate that for your project, for example, in 6 million pesos in additional revenue, which would be around $350,000. So that's like one very concrete way, right? Making some assumptions, but at the same time, it's clearly based on the data, right? And I think that's right. Really, that's what we see a lot with these types of estimates, like what you can improve in a project. You do it based on the data that you get out of your post-mining analysis, and you project that in the future, like in some way.
Yeah. You have to estimate the average cost, but you also have to estimate the average revenue. How much are you getting out of each service? Yes. And if, of course, when I asked the people, how many of you would come back next year if I don't deliver on time? And the answer was none of them. So just imagine the customers saying the same. So the proper service, would you return? And then they all said no. Mm-hmm. So that's not good. could happen to our customers. They could say no next time. Yeah.
Yeah, so Marcus is mentioning that developing a business case is kind of part of the stakeholder management, right? So you take a particular angle on developing that business case for that stakeholder, but he is also mentioning you cannot satisfy every stakeholder. So how did you do that, Miguel, in this particular case? So did you take one particular stakeholder in your scenario that needed to decide about the biggest part maybe of the investment, right? So how did you deal with this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the first it was the physician side because they were measured because of the delivery on time percentage, and since they were concerned about that percentage of delivery on time, that was the first thing that we addressed. And of course, when you have dedicated resources in terms of getting data, change some programs, training, and everything, you have to spend money on that. And someone is going, how I'm going to get my money back after this. And then we moved to the financial department to work with them on how much of the delivery time was really a benefit in terms of revenues. So you can work with one stakeholder, but since we have a value management office that was very interested in getting the case in terms of financial records also, we show them how you can put, for example, $100 to any business and how many services you can get out of those $100. And if you don't get those deliveries in terms of percentage, for example, like we have only 60% of deliveries, what if deliver 100%? And that's the key. So that's how we estimated the benefits in terms of money. How much can you get if you deliver 100% and not 80% or 50%?
Yeah. But you can look at it from different angles, right? That's one way to look at it. But for example, for the same problem, especially with these kind of peaks that you have in volume, and because you are growing, another solution could have been to hire additional people, right? So that's another way maybe how one could make another case to say, well, we avoid hiring these additional people and it's saving us so much to still meet the demand.
That was one of the first ideas in terms of changing the way we were delivering. Hire some people at that time, and that's going to solve the problem. But since we discovered the real problem by using the maps and the statistics that were coming from process mapping, we discovered that we don't have a problem of resources. We have a problem of distribution. So actually, the numbers that you saw, we increased the number of services. We reduced the time. We didn't hire any people, any additional person. And that was great.
So what I often see in practice, right? So there's also part of a lot of lean initiatives. When they start developing these initiatives in the define phase, they need to carve out the problem, but also kind of start a statement of the business case. Is that they try to figure out a balance between these costs and benefits already from the start, right? So if you only focus on cost, then eventually it should end up in a P&L, right? So you should go to a manager and then take it out, right? So, and if you take out money, then maybe you take away people, and you get kind of a negative initiative because it's about cost saving. And if you balance this out, on the other hand, well, if you can fill that void with new work, right? So if you are a growing company, then that would be a little bit more easy, but you can also do new marketing. So then do more work with the same people is kind of doing the same thing, but it's more positive, right? Because you kind of grow along the way. And that's often trying to find a balance between the cost saving and then being able how to deal with this. Should we take it out from the P&L? And that's really hard, often because these conversations said you should take money out of a particular budget. So often managers are not happy with this, right? Because then it impacts their ability, what they actually can do. But balancing it out with something positive by growing is a good practice. Try to do this. And that's also, I think, what you also mentioned with your particular example. You're not only focused on the cost aspect of it, but also look at the opportunity. If we do it in a shorter time, then we can grow our business, right? So then, of course, with the same amount of people, we are able to deal with more requests, still maintaining the same quality.
Yeah. Even better quality.
Yeah, even better quality in this case.
Oh, great. No, this has been really useful discussion. So very, very happy with it. It's like, there's so many more examples like we could show, right? Maybe we link a few additional examples like in the show notes when we publish the recording for this cafe, because it's one of the traditional ways to always look at the cost savings, right? So for example, saving steps or something, but looking at how to better use the resources, or also qualitative dimensions. That's a little bit more challenging. What you described with the kind of additional revenue, Miguel, I had to think of a call center case several years ago, where they had to make a business case for improving their customer service, which was also hard, right? So essentially they improved the quality of the customer service, and then how they measured that, they were trying to increase the customer satisfaction. So, and they assumed somehow by an increase in customer satisfaction, the brand was gaining more positive recognition, and then eventually this leads to more sales, right? You can see how many assumptions you have to make on the way, but
well, actually it's different because of the different businesses we may have. But let me tell you, one of the managers, they recently came to us. We work with that particular company, and they have a promise on delivery time of 3 days for some services. And because of the implementation of the continuous flow, we reduce the time by 1 day, and in some cases by 2 days. So many of those are delivering the services on 1 day when they have a promise of 3 days delivery. And one of the things that he said is, I don't know why is coming more people to us. They are requesting more and more services. I think they notice that we are delivering faster than our competitors, and they are coming. And he mentioned that even he had an increase on 30% of the deliveries in recent days. I don't have the numbers to say, well, that's true or not, but he is really, really happy with the performance that they have, and they are very, very happy to deliver more and more in less time. So I think customers are going to notice that. And of course, we had to wait a little bit longer to see those numbers, but it's working now.
Yeah, that's the base, right? That's what usually, in the best case, we're trying to achieve with these process improvements. It's like a win-win for everyone. It's becoming better for the customers, for the company, for everyone. So that's really great example. Yeah, I think we're a little bit at the end. So are there any last points you want to mention, or anything to close?
I would like to say that this work started at the operational excellence department with the analysis of some data, but you need to work with people. We are engineers, most of us on the operational excellence department are engineers, and we're working with technicians, physicians, and all of them that have a completely different background. And one of the things that you had to discover is that they are really in charge of their work. So our job is to show them how can we improve the processes, but at the end they are doing the real job. They are creating the new processes. They suggest new ways to work. They suggest and propose a new distribution. I think people other than the operational excellence department or quality departments is what really makes this difference. You had to convince them that they didn't have to change, but once you convince them, all of this from them. I think the results that we got are results from people working all over the sites, just by showing them what was happening, how we can improve. And of course, put always a customer as the reference. Don't tell them that they have to change because we need to cut costs. I think we need to change because customers are waiting for us to serve in a better way.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, couldn't be a better closing word, I think. You want to add anything, really?
No, I think it's interesting, right? To look at the business case, but it's always kind of a chicken and egg where to start, right? So developing a business case could be as easy as having it in your mind and then it's already there, right? From the start, but it could also be a pain when you start doing the analysis and trying to translate it. And that's kind of finding the way, right? So should you start with a very clear-cut business case before you actually start, before you actually can make the investment? Or can you work your way bottom up to develop the business case to understand whether or not it's there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's often what you kind of see as the first challenge. If you look at process mining, I think there are a couple of things that can be tied into a business case and a couple of things that you cannot tie into a business case. And that's also something important to keep in mind, right? So to look at NPS scores or customer satisfaction, it's not only the process where people are satisfied about, right? So it's also the product itself. And so we can think that it's a one-on-one correlation, but it just isn't, right? So maybe it's just a very small percentage. And so we need to be aware of these elements. If you look at the output benefits, right? Is it one-to-one or are there a relationship to it? And you have to make assumptions, right? So that's kind of what you mentioned there. Yeah. But there are a couple of things that make things a little bit easier to make it practical. Of course, you can, for example, if you look at the cost-benefit structure, you can calculate all the time spent by particular resources. But you can also take the simple approach by just counting the number of times a particular activity happens and then assumes how much time on average is being spent or a median, right? And then start to estimate how much rework is there to make an estimate of how much benefits are there, right? So that's one of the practical approaches you can take. And there are many more from a process mining point of view. So another perspective is try to keep it simple. You cannot be exact because you have to make an assumption, but try to keep it simple for yourself so that you can explain it where people kind of say, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer, right? So that's kind of where you should arrive at, that they're not hesitant anymore to do the investment, right? So it's so much benefits, even if it's 1/3, right? So even if it's not half anymore, it's still a very good use case or a very good case to maintain. And that's, I think it's part of the art, right? For some people, it's very easy to do and it's part of their common nature or they have done it many times before. For some people, it's new and then it will take some time to get it right.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Very well said. So with the discussion today and with the ROI template from last week and the business case article and the links we're going to share. So this is all, we're trying to give you some input to get started, to find your way with this. And especially if you're new to this and if you already have some experience and want to share that with us, please do. We are really interested and curious to hear additional thoughts that you have. If you have any more comments for Miguel, we will pass that on. You can email us at at camp@fluxicon.com, or find us in any way that you want to find us. So we will continue the discussion. It's of course a continuous topic. But thanks a lot, Miguel, for coming to the cafe today to share your project and discuss this with us. It was really, really helpful.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Yes, we all will see each other again next month for a new post-mining cafe. We will talk about variant analysis, right, Rudy? Just the two of us.
Yep.
And also, of course, don't forget to get your camp ticket. If you can come, we would really love to have you at Eindhoven in the Netherlands on 13th and 14th June. And you can get your morning person ticket until the end of this Friday. See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.